Hello, dear colleagues. The talk by Sergei Petoukhov, Universal Rules of Genomic Stochastic and the Doctrine of Energy Information Evolution based on bio-antenna arrays. Genetic as science began with Mendel's discovery of the stochastic rules of inheritance and of traits in experiments on the crossing of organisms. Many processes in living bodies are of a stochastic nature. The well-known expressions gene noise or cell noise reflect the fact that even genetically identical cells within the same tissue exhibit different levels of protein expression, different sizes and structures due to the stochastic nature of interactions of individual molecules in cells. No wonder Jordan, who was one of the founders of quantum mechanics and the author of the first article on quantum biology, stated, "Life missing laws are the rules of chance and probability of the quantum world." The stochastic nature of genetic processes in the small does not interfere with the inheritance of the traits determined in the big. For example, fingerprints are different for all people, although fingers in general have a typical shape and composition, 3 phalanges, etc. According to Mendel's law of independent inheritance of traits, information from the level of DNA molecules dictates the macrostructure of living bodies through many independent channels despite strong noises. Thus, hair, eye, and skin colors are inherited independently of each other. Accordingly, each organism is a machine of multi-channel noise immunity encoding. This talk presents the author's attempts to break through to an understanding of how and on what algebraic or physical foundations this biological noise immune multi-channel machine is arranged. The talk contains 4 main parts. Firstly, biological dualism, probability versus determinism, and Gestalt-biology. Secondly, Matrix-tensor representations of molecular genetic ensembles and universal rules of stochastic probability organization of genomic DNAs. Thirdly, digital antenna arrays, smart antenna, and their tensor matrix theory, which has algebraic analogies with matrix-tensor genetics. Fourth, the doctrine of evolution based on bio-antenna arrays. Firstly, dualism of probability versus determinism and Gestalt-biology. One of the examples of the connection between stochastic and deterministic features in biology is given by the phenomenon of biomechanics of movements by the classic of biomechanics Bernstein. The general target task of movement is performed exactly regardless of the inaccuracies of its constituent motor subtask. For example, when repeating an exact hit with a hammer on a nail, each time a person uses different trajectories, speeds, and accelerations of body parts, with a chance in both the flexion angles in the joints and the activity of many muscles of each joint, with many motor neurons of each muscle. This example shows that the intelligence of an organism works with the probabilistic characteristics of local movements of the body's links, giving out a deterministic general result of movement, hitting the target. The described phenomenon of biomechanics of movements belongs to the broad topic of Gestalt-biology, in which stable holistic patterns are formed regardless of the variety of their constituent parts. For example, Gestalt psychology studies the innate properties of the brain to form holistic images that are relatively independent of their particular components. Thus, a musical melody is recognized by us even when it is played on different instruments and in different frequency ranges. This is an inherited fundamental property of the psyche, to seek in a disparate whole. In biology, there are many other genetically inherited Gestalt phenomena. Morphogenetic, homeostatic, sensory, etc., in which a stable holistic pattern is realized in conditions of a wide variability of its constituent components. For example, the molecular composition of a living body is constantly changing while maintaining the shape of the body. Its proteins are involved in continuous cycles, life, death, of stochastic assembly and disassembly into amino acids. For example, the half-life of the hormone insulin is 6 minutes, etc. In other words, genetically inherited parts of our body are constantly dying and reborn. According to the physiologist Gurvich, the main problem of biology is maintaining the shape with constant renewal of the substrate. All physiological systems are genetically inherited through their genetic coding. Therefore, one should look for the origin of this inherited Gestalt phenomena of physiology in the genetic system of DNA informatics. In the course of such searches, the speaker discovered that already in the information system of DNA molecules of the genomes of higher and lower organisms, universal Gestalt phenomena of their stochastic organization are embedded. Let us explain this. Part 2. Matrix-tensor representations of molecular genetic ensembles and universal rule of stochastic probability organization of genomic DNAs. Genetic information on DNA molecules is written in a sequence of 4 nucleotides, molecular letters, adenine A, guanine G, cytosine C, and thymine T. DNA also contains alphabets of 16 duplets, 64 triplets, 256 tetraplets, etc. All these interrelated alphabets are represented in matrix form as members of a single tensor family of matrices, CATG in n tensor power. The columns and rows of these matrices of DNA alphabets are binary numbered based on molecular binary indicators of nucleotides. The columns are numbered with binary indicators pyrimidine of urine in blue, C and T is equal to 1, A and G is equal to 0, and rows with binary indicators amino or keta. The red presentation, C and A is equal 1, T and G is equal to 0. These 3 tables form a single tensor family of matrices. The second and third tensor Kronecker powers of the 2 and 2 matrices automatically give this 4 and 4 matrix of 16 duplets alphabet, and these 8 and 8 matrix of 64 triplet alphabet. The tensor product of matrices play an important role in quantum informatics and quantum mechanics. The state space of a multi-component quantum system is the tensor product of the state spaces of its components. How are the 20 amino acids encoding by them and the stop signals of protein synthesis located in this matrix of 64 triplets? The number of options for the arrangements of amino acids with their some kind of repetitions to fill the entire 8 and 8 matrix is huge, much more than 10 in 100 power. For comparison, in physics, the lifetime of the universe is estimated at 10 in 17 power seconds only. Will this arrangement of amino acids be chaotic, or will it suddenly turn out to be naturally symmetrical? It turns out that from the ocean of possibilities, nature has chosen an algebraically regular version of the repetition and arrangement of amino acids and stop signals in this matrix of 64 triplets. The case of the genetic code of vertebrate mitochondria is shown. The matrix of encoded amino acids and stop signals, shown on the right, consists of pairs of adjacent rows of identical amino acids and stop codons in colors. This tensor matrix regularity is one of the evidence of a deep connection between genetic coding and the formalisms of quantum informatics. It is interesting that the matrix of 64 triplets in its binary positional structure is similar to the famous table of 64 Yin-Yang hexagrams of the ancient Chinese Book of Changes, I Ching. I Ching was written several thousand years ago and has had a powerful influence on Oriental medicine and culture. In connection with it, acupuncture and Tibetan pulse diagnostics were developed. Carl Jung believed that its trigram and hexagrams fix a universal set of archetypes, innate mental structures. The ancient Chinese claimed that this table of 64 hexagrams is a universal natural archetype. They did not know anything about the genetic code, but it, with its 64 genetic triplets and binary properties, turns out to be surprisingly similar to this table and schemes of the I Ching. In our study, this matrix of 64 triplets is used in resultative analysis of stochastic organization of genomic DNAs. Study of the stochastic organization of genetic DNAs, next section. For example, let's turn to the DNA of the first human chromosome, which contains a sequence of about 250 million nucleotides. Calculating in this DNA the percentages of each member of the DNA alphabet of 4 nucleotides, we obtain a table of their probabilities. Then we represent the same DNA as a text of 2-letter words, such as CA, TT, GA, based on the alphabet of 16 duplets, and calculating the percentage of each of the type of duplets, we get a table of percentages of 16 types of duplets now. See slide. Similarly, presenting the same DNA as a text of 3-letter words And then, as a text of 4-letter words, etc., we obtain the corresponding tables of percentages of kinds of n-plet in these texts, written respectively using the alphabets of 60 for triplets, 256 tetraplets, etc. For example, for a text of 3-letter words, we have a percentage of 60 for triplets. See slide. Thus, according to this method, the nucleotide sequences in each single-stranded genomic DNA turn out to be a whole bunch of parallel texts, each of which is written in its own alphabet of n-plets. And the DNA as a whole appears as a multilingual object. This method proved to be effective and has led to the discovery of universal rules and symmetries of the stochastic organization of genomes. Taking this into account, figuratively speaking, any genomic DNA speaks many languages, is a polyglot. At first glance, the resulting sets of percentages of n-plets in this n-plets DNA text are quite chaotic. Moreover, the percentage of types of n-plets in these texts depends on the order of the letters. For example, in the two-bit textual representation of the DNA under consideration, the percentage of CG and GC duplets of the same letter composition differs several times. But in this seeming chaos, there are many universal rules for n-plet groupings that are valid for all studied genomes. For example, special n-plets grouping in matrices of probabilities for different n-texts of the DNA are numerically interrelated. Knowing the percentage of a nucleotide in genomic DNA, it is possible to predict with high accuracy the sums of the percentages of 4 duplets, 16 triplets, 64 tetraplets with this nucleotide at first position in the duplet, triplet, and tetraplet representations of the genomic DNA sequence. For example, %C is practically equal to the sum of the percentages of 4 duplets starting with C, the sum of the percentages of 16 duplets beginning with C, the sum of 64 triplets beginning with C, and so on. See the table where N denotes any of nucleotides C, A, T, G. This constancy of sums of probabilities of n-plets under conditions of different values and numbers of summands is one of the type of Gestalt rules of probabilities in genomic DNAs. Other types of Gestalt rules for probabilities in genomic DNAs can be found in the speaker's publication on his website. Genomes of eukaryotes and prokaryotes. Similar Gestalt rules of stochastic organization of the genomic DNAs holds for all already analyzed DNA sequences in genomes. All 24 human chromosomes, all chromosomes of Drosophila, mouse, worms, many plants, 19 genomes of bacteria and archaea, many extremophiles living in extreme conditions, for example, radiation with a level 1,000 times higher than fatal for humans. The universal Gestalt rules and symmetries identified by the speaker in the stochastic organization of genomic DNAs of higher and lower organisms indicate the existence of non-trivial algebraic invariants of a globally genomic nature, which remain unchanged over million years of biological evolution, during which millions of species of organisms die off and new ones appear, although locally genomic sequences are modified by mutations, natural selection mechanisms, etc. This seems to be connected with the question of the origin of life, since these patterns are presented also in archaea and bacteria. The discovered universal Gestalt rules of the block stochastic organization of genomic DNAs indicate the existence of quantum mechanical long-range links in the nucleotide DNA sequences. They are used to create new approaches to artificial intelligence and a new view of organisms as algebraic entities associated with the formalisms of quantum informatics. Part 3. System algebraic analogies of matrix-tensor genetics with the tensor matrix theory of digital antenna arrays, smart antennas. The speaker revealed that the described matrices of probabilities of n-plets from n-text of any considered genomic DNA are interrelated on the basis of algebraic equations using block matrices and the Hadamard product of matrices, which is a well-known operation symbolized by the symbol shown. For example, in genomic DNAs, the 2n2 matrix of monoplet probabilities is interrelated with the 4n4 matrix of duplet probabilities by the equation with additional 2n2 matrices BC, BA, BT, BC, BG, and additional matrices are see slide. Similarly, the interrelation between the 4 and 4 matrix of duplet probabilities and the 8 and 8 matrix of triplet probabilities are expressed by the equation using the Hadamard product. See slide. Analogies with tensor matrix theory of digital antenna arrays. Okay. Analogy method is one of the basic methods in sciences, as known at least from the time of Bolzano. Max Planck wrote, "We thus find that it is a characteristic of every new idea occurring in science that it combines in a certain original manner two distinct series of facts. The speaker pays attention that the described algebraic connections between the probability matrices of genomic DNAs are analogical to formalisms of the well-known tensor matrix theory of digital antenna arrays. The theory using the Hadamard product was developed by Ukrainian Professor Slusar. It gives very advantageous possibilities in the field of many component digital antenna arrays, also called smart antennas. It was this analogy between the matrix tensor formalisms in genetics and in the theory of smart antennas that initially led the speaker to the doctrine of energy information evolution based on bio-antenna arrays. The topic of smart antennas is very new for biology, and we should briefly describe them. Antenna arrays have 1,000 applications: medical ultrasound scanning technology, sonar systems, radio relay stations, radio astronomic devices, avionics, and many others. Modern science connects with antenna arrays future revolutionary changes in computers, biophotonics, and energetics, effective using solar energy by using non-antenna arrays. Antenna arrays consists of many separate antennas, each of which can emit or absorb waves of a specific frequency range. These sets of antennas in antenna arrays can be located in space in variety configurations and dimensions. The design of non-antenna arrays can use photonic crystals and liquid crystals, which are actively used in modern technology and which exist in all biobodies. Emerging properties of antenna arrays. Antenna arrays provide such kinds of radiation patterns or beam forming which are unable for a single antenna element. Let's list many emergent properties of antenna arrays. Firstly, in a compare with a single antenna, an array of n elements allow to increase approximately n times the directivity and the gain of the antenna, as well as allow to narrow beams. Secondly, antenna arrays are a unique tool for providing communication, noise immunity, and extracting a weak signal from a strong noise. Thirdly, phased antenna arrays capable of operating with multi-beam radiation patterns. A phased array usually means an electronically scanned and computer-controlled array of antennas, which creates a beam of radio waves that can be electronically steered to point in different directions without moving the antennas. It should be noted that the beams of antenna arrays carry not only information signals, but also energy, participating in its transferring and redistribution. Given these unique emergent properties of antenna arrays, it can be expected that organisms are forced to use them in their life activity. The presented doctrine confirms this expectation on a set of examples of the structure and functioning of inherited physiological systems based on antenna arrays and their energy waves. Let's show some examples of such inherited systems. Considering these examples, one should remember that electrical and vibro-mechanical oscillations in living bodies are closely connected because many tissues are piezoelectrical. Nucleic acids, actin, dentin, tendons, bone, etc. First example, complex faceted ice. Insects and some other invertebrates receive visual information through complex faceted ice, which serve as bio-antenna arrays for receiving electromagnetic waves. They are formed by special structural units, omatidia. The image perceived of such ice recalculated from the numerous omatidia. For example, faceted eyes of dragon flies have up to 30,000 omatidia. Inherited phenomena of biological echolocation. Many organisms have an innate ability to echolocation based on directed rays of a wave nature. Due to the mechanism of echolocation, for example, dolphins and bats are able to recognize not only the distance to the target, but also the dimensions and shape of the objects they track, by analogy with how active digital antenna arrays, smart antennas, make it possible in technology. A dolphin's body has many hydroacoustic receptors, which form a multi-element broad-band hydroacoustic receiving antenna. Inherited phenomena of biological electrolocation. Electrolocation is also widespread with the generation and reception of electric fields for solving by organisms many vital tasks of a search, evaluation, and communication nature. In active electrolocation, the animal senses its surrounding environment by generating electric fields and detecting distortions in these fields using electroreceptor organs. These organs are distributed through the body, forming bio-antenna arrays, the cumulating reading of which are processed by the body. It is the arrangement of electromagnetic field receptors in red on the shark's head, which form a receiving bio-antenna array. Inherited sets of biophoton crystals. Photonic crystals from heritable species, patterns on butterfly wings and peacock feathers are shown. Engineering technologies actively use photonic crystals to control the spatial distribution of photon beams. A photonic crystals is a periodic optical nanostructure that affects the motion of photons. Many animals in nature responsive photonic crystals in their intelligent-like activities for camouflage, signaling, etc. Photonic crystals are related to the topic of nano-antenna arrays in two ways. Firstly, nano-antennas are often referred to as nano-devices that allow the scattering of radiation in a given direction. Photonic crystals and their arrays are such devices. Secondly, the location of many photonic crystals as a screen next to the nano-antenna can change its functional characteristics. Inherited system of liquid crystals now. DNA and RNA, some proteins, membranes, and cytoskeleton of cells are liquid crystals, which can also form nano-bioantenna arrays. Of particular interest for biological research are liquid crystals called chiral faces or twisted nematics. For these crystals, the direction of the orientation of molecules in successive layers changes in a spiral. Nano-antennas based on DNA are already used in scientific technologies. Scientists at the University of Montreal in Canada have created glowing nano-antennas from DNA molecules to track the relationship within proteins. These nano-antennas are capable of fluorescence and can absorb radiation at one wavelength and emit light at different frequency, depending on the molecular environment. It is natural to believe that electromagnetic activity via nano-antenna arrays is involved in particular in the distribution of rest potentials on cell membranes, which are liquid crystals. This factor of rest potentials are important for morphogenetic processes and the regenerations, as it was shown in impressive experimental works by M.Levin and his colleagues at Tufts University, USA. These works were carried out on flatworms, planarians, which have a head, a true brain, etc. Planarians are known champions in organ and tissue regenerations. The noted works studied regeneration of amputation parts of worm's body and showed that the determination of the correct position of the organs in the worm's body is controlled by the distribution of membrane potentials in not yet differentiated cells. Artificial changing by ionophores, the typical distribution of the membrane potentials of an amputated fragments of the worm's body leads to the formation of planarians with two heads. One should know that such artificial influence on liquid crystal membranes can significantly change cell systems of liquid crystal bioantenna arrays participating in morphogenetic processes. Two-headed worm from 11 words is shown. It is especially remarkable that if both heads are cut off from the resulting two-headed worm, then a two-headed worm is again regenerated from the remaining middle fragment. And this procedure can be repeated many times, each time receiving the regeneration of two-headed worm. According to Levin, this means that the memory of the correct structure of the body, which should be formed after regeneration, turns out to be radically changed, although the genome of this organism did not change and remained the same. Therefore, the memory that tells the worm about how many hits it should have is contained not in the genome at all. These experimental facts have led Levin to the important idea that emergent properties of an ensemble of cells are key participants of morphological and some other processes. Multicellular ensembles are able to determine the time of morphological patterns formed, largely independently of the information in DNA, which is essential for coding of proteins. This idea generated new experiments in which Levin showed that the combination of cells from the skin of a frog into a single ensemble leads to the appearance of a teeny body of a completely new design. Such bodies, which are biological robots called xenobots, can move, navigate a labyrinth, explore the environment, feed and heal themselves, and exhibit emergent group behavior, although they don't have a nervous system, don't have a brain, and they are simply collections of skin cells with unchanged DNAs. Xenobots can live 10 or 14 days. These results allowed generating Levin's concept that the electrical blueprints orchestrate life. Our doctrine of evolution based on bioantenna arrays proposes another basis point of view. This doctrine states that just bioantenna arrays with their coordinated electromagnetic waves orchestrate life. This doctrine draws attention to important factors of electromagnetic waves, which are absent in the concept of the electrical blueprints. Firstly, electromagnetic waves of bioantenna arrays are involved in the operational transfer and redistribution of energy between the elements of the body. Secondly, for connections between parts of each biobody, electromagnetic waves provide participations of magnetic and piezo vibration components besides electrical potentials. Thirdly, the types of polarization of electromagnetic waves of bioantenna arrays are important for relationship between the elements of the biobody, since they are associated with the fundamental problem of biological dissymmetry and molecular chirality noted by Pasteur. Fourth, memory and intellectual abilities are connected with bioantenna arrays and their wave-coordinated activity. Fifth, the unique ability of antenna arrays to provide noise-resistant multi-channel operation with the extraction of weak signals against the background of strong noise allows us to rethink the phenomenal ability of organisms to work in many parallel channels with weak information signals against the background of strong noise with providing information noise immunity. Remind that according to Mendel's law of independent inheritance of traits, information from the level of DNA molecule dictates the macrostructure of living bodies through many independent channels despite strong noises. For example, hair, eye, and skin colors are inherited independently of each other. So each organism is a machine of multi-channel noise immunity encoding. Concerning the role of bioantenna arrays in energy flows in biobodies, one can add that the idea of the organizing role of coordinated energy flows inside the body exists since ancient times. It is associated with ancient Chinese ideas about a certain special energy, qi, whose circulation defines human health and illness, and which determines the existence of energy pathways called acupuncture meridians. By the impact of acupuncture needs on these meridians, these energy flows can be corrected. It cannot be ruled out that this mysterious energy qi is partially or completely, precisely, the energy of a multitude of coordinated electromagnetic and other wave rays from bioantenna arrays. The genetic code and bioantenna arrays, next section. The described tensor matrix analogies between structures of stochastic organization of genomes and smart antennas allow believing that the genetic code itself is one of the offsprings of wave activity and self-organization of bioantenna arrays. And this code is connected with other inherited physiological offsprings of bioantenna arrays in the organism. The secret of the structural organization and origin of the genetic code, as well as the origin of organisms, must be sought not in the random combination of the molecular element of the genetic code, but in the emergent properties of self-organizing systems of bioantenna arrays with their wave energy activity. Accordingly, It is not genes that are the dictators of all life activity, since they themselves are built into the energy information coherences of bio-antenna arrays and are produced by them. People has long discussed the relationship between innate knowledge and knowledge acquired in the course of life. The extreme point of view is formulated in Plato's famous statement that to know means to remember, awakening as it were from sleep. Close to this is the widespread opinion that our body already carries in hidden forms the fullness of knowledge, whose parts come into our consciousness when they're insistently requested. But our body grows from a single fertilized cell. This original single cell cannot contain all the named completeness of knowledge. Additional knowledge should come into our body from outside in the course of ontogeny. It is the ensembles of bio-antenna arrays that can serve as the system through which cosmic and planetary wave energy information influences enter the body from the outside world. These external influences are necessary for the adequate development and replenishment of the body's knowledge. This talk presents only fragments of our works in algebraic biology. Many other materials are available free accessed on the speaker's website. Many details of today's talk are in the preprints. See slide. Thank you very much for your attention.